Rain hit the hotel awning in cold silver sheets, and somewhere behind her the ballroom kept applauding for a man who had just ruined her life. Sienna Bellini was 24, a pastry chef in Manhattan, and she had never begged in public. She came to work with a simple plan: finish the charity gala, keep her job, pay for her mother's surgery, until Dante Salvatore followed her outside. Why would the most dangerous man in the room leave a room full of politicians and money for a fired woman with sugar on her cuff and no future left by midnight? Why did one look from him feel less like comfort and more like being chosen for something she did not understand yet? For the first time in her life, Sienna stepped into the rain without defending herself. And the man who came after her did not bring pity. He brought an umbrella, a war, and a future that would cost her everything she had been. The ballroom smelled like melted sugar, lilies, and money. Not fresh money. Old money. The kind that sat under chandeliers and assumed everyone else would clean up after it. I had plated 212 desserts under hot lights and worse timing, and by the time the final course rolled out, my feet had gone numb inside my kitchen clogs. The chocolate domes were perfect, mirror glaze without a single drag mark, candied orange peel stacked like little flames, bitter espresso sponge underneath. I knew because I had touched every plate myself. Then table 14 never received theirs. Instead, a waiter carried one of my domes to the head table, a table I had been told twice, very clearly, not to touch. I saw it from the service door and felt my stomach drop before I understood why. The garnish was wrong, not the peel, the dusting. I had used cocoa and blood orange powder. This plate carried a fine white finish that looked pretty under crystal light and would never have come from my station. I crossed the room before anyone stopped me. "Sienna," Chef Rulli hissed from behind the floral display. "What are you doing? That plate isn't mine." He grabbed my elbow. "Do not make a scene." I looked past him. At the head table sat senators, donors, hotel investors, and one man the whole room seemed to bend around without ever staring directly at him. Dante Salvatore, dark suit, white shirt with no tie, one broad hand around a whiskey glass. He was listening to someone on his left, but not really. Men like that never fully listened in one direction. The wrong plate was being lowered toward him. "Stop," I said, too late. Every sound in the ballroom seemed to turn and look at me, forks pausing, glasses held half an inch from mouths. The waiter's hand trembled. Chef Rulli dropped my elbow and smiled the way cowards do when they smell blood, but hope it isn't theirs. I crossed the last few feet and took the plate off the tray myself. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Rulli said, loud now, public now. I should have softened it. Lied. Said allergy issue, plating correction. Anything smaller than the truth. Instead, I looked down at the sugar dusting and smelled bitter almond under the chocolate. Not enough to kill, maybe. Enough to make someone very sick. Enough to start something worse if the right man collapsed in the middle of a charity gala. "This didn't come from my station," I said. Someone at the head table sat back. Dante did not move at all. Rulli gave a short laugh. "So now you accuse my staff because you plated the wrong tray?" "I didn't." "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why your initials are on the prep sheet." He held up a clipboard I had never seen. My initials were on it. Neat. Perfect. False. My face went hot and cold at the same time. The young busboy beside the waiter made a sound in his throat. Paolo. 19 maybe. Thin wrists. New shoes he wiped every 20 minutes because he was afraid rich people noticed dust. He stared at the doctored plate like it might confess for him. Rulli turned toward the room as if he had been waiting his whole life for an audience. "I will not tolerate negligence tonight of all nights. Sienna Bellini, you are finished here." He said it into a microphone meant for auction announcements. The humiliation arrived complete. Amplified. There was no corner of the room where my firing did not land. Paolo took one step forward. "Chef, I caught his wrist before he could ruin himself." He looked at me, panicked. I saw everything at once. The folded note in his apron pocket with his children's daycare pickup times, the grease stain on his cuff from the second job he probably worked after this one, the absolute certainty that if he spoke, Rulli would let him take all of it and thank him for the convenience. So I pressed his wrist once and said quietly, "Don't." It was the same voice I used for sugar work. Gentle enough not to crack anything. I set the poisoned plate on the nearest side table. Then I untied my apron under 400 eyes and folded it carefully because my mother had raised me better than to throw things when men wanted spectacle. "I'm sorry for the disruption," I said. That was all. No begging, no tears, no explanation for people who had already chosen what version of me they wanted. I turned and walked out through the ballroom doors while applause restarted for the next auction item. Outside, rain hit the pavement hard enough to splash up my bare ankles. I had left my coat in the pastry locker. Of course I had. Of all the stupid details, that one nearly made me laugh. I made it 3 steps beyond the awning before someone came after me. Not fast, not calling my name. Just the measured sound of expensive shoes on wet stone. Then the umbrella opened over my head with one clean, elegant snap. I stopped. The black canopy cut the rain away so completely it felt like stepping into another temperature. Dante Salvatore stood beside me, one hand on the umbrella shaft, the other in his coat pocket. Up close he smelled like cedar, clean wool and cold air. Not cologne first. Night first. I looked at him because not looking would have been worse. The hotel light caught the silver at his wrist and the stillness in his face. Dangerous men in movies always look dramatic. Real dangerous men looked patient. "You stopped a plate from reaching my table," he said. His voice was quiet enough to make me come closer to hear it. That felt deliberate. It wasn't safe. You knew that from one glance. And one smell. Rain rushed around the umbrella in silver sheets. Taxes hissed past the curb. My heart had still not caught up to the ballroom. He studied me for a second too long. Not my dress, my face. "Why did you stop the boy from speaking?" The question landed harder than the firing had. I looked away toward the street, because Chef Rowley would have burned him alive for a mistake he didn't understand. "So you took it?" "Yes." "You lost your job." I let out a breath that shook despite my best efforts. I noticed. That almost changed his mouth. Not a smile, the memory of one. "Little fire," he said. I frowned. "What?" "You burn quietly." The name was not affectionate. It sounded like classification. Ownership of an observation I had not offered him. I should have walked away from that. Instead I said, "Did you come out here to thank me?" "No." He answered so simply I almost respected him for it. "Then why are you following me?" "Because someone inside just tried to poison a plate at my table, and the woman who prevented it was framed before the glaze cooled." He tilted the umbrella, lowering it farther over me than over himself, which means if you're left alone tonight, someone will try to solve the same problem twice. The rain seemed to get louder. I stared at him. He held my gaze without any of the false warmth I had been taught to trust in safer men. A black car slid to the curb. Dante opened the rear door. "Get in," he said. The ballroom doors were still open behind us. Light, applause, my old life. The rain ran cold down the back of my neck. Then I got in. The door shut with a weight that felt expensive and final. For a few seconds I could still hear the rain. Then the car moved, and Manhattan became blur and glass outside the tinted window. I sat stiffly in the corner of the back seat with my damp dress clinging to my knees and tried not to think about how easily a stranger had redirected the rest of my life. Dante sat beside me without crowding me. That was almost worse. Enough distance to look gentlemanly, not enough to forget I was trapped in a moving vehicle with a man people lowered their voices around. The umbrella lay closed between us. Rain still beating on the black silk. In the front seat, the driver glanced at me in the mirror and made a face that suggested his evening had been personally inconvenienced by my existence. He was handsome in a tired, over-argued way, with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and the expression of a man who believed carbohydrates had betrayed him on a spiritual level. "This is not how I planned my macros," he muttered. Dante didn't look at him. "Drive, Nino." "I am driving. I'm also suffering." I should not have almost smiled. I definitely should not have done it with Dante sitting 6 inches away. But the line came so unexpectedly into the cold tightness of the night that it slipped out anyway. Nino saw it in the mirror. Thank God. a witness that I'm charming. You are neither, Dante said. That is slander from my own employer. The city light shifted over Dante's face as he turned toward me. Did anyone besides the boy handle your station tonight? My almost smile vanished. 3 people had access. Me, Chef Ruley, and the night pastry porter. Names. I gave them. He listened to the way surgeons cut. Exact. No wasted motion. He asked about prep sheets, ingredient deliveries, who usually signed the allergy logs, who knew I had the final garnish assignment. By the 5th question, I understood something ugly and clarifying. He had believed me in the rain. But belief did not mean mercy. It meant use. I need my phone, I said when he paused. No. The answer came so quickly, my head snapped toward him. My mother will call when I don't come home. You can call her from my house. My house, I echoed. Nino let out a low whistle. See, boss, when you say things like that, women normally expect dinner first. Dante ignored him. I folded my hands together so he wouldn't see them shake. I'm not going to your house. You are tonight. You don't get to decide that. He looked at me then. Really looked. The car seemed to get smaller around it. Ms. Bellini, he said, and the use of my name should have made him sound more human than Little Fire had. It didn't. One man framed you in a ballroom full of cameras. Another man, or the same one, may already be waiting near your apartment. You can argue principle with me if you like. You cannot argue math. That landed because it was true. I hated him for being right in that calm, unspectacular way. Hated myself a little for feeling steadier because he was the one saying it. I looked down at the closed umbrella between us. You could hand me to the police. No. Why? Because whoever arranged tonight either sits inside lawful systems or pays people who do. I don't outsource my problems. Problems. My throat tightened. That's what I am? No, he said. The word came quiet enough that I looked up before I meant to. You're the reason I know there was a problem at all. I had no idea what to do with that. The car turned off the avenue and entered a private drive lined with bare plane trees. Iron gates slid open before us. Stone walls rose beyond them, then a house that did not look like a house so much as a private answer to the question of power. Warm windows. Dark stone. Too many cameras not to be seen only because they were not meant for amateurs. Nino pulled up beneath a covered entry and sighed at the sight of 3 pigeons huddled under the arch. Animals know weakness, he said darkly. They're birds, I said before I could stop myself. They are organized. Dante got out first. When I hesitated, he held the door without comment. That should not have mattered. It did. Inside, the house smelled like polished wood, espresso, and the faint medicinal clean of some place where damage got handled quickly. A woman in navy scrubs came down the staircase holding a tablet and looked from Dante to me, to my damp hemline. Tell me she's not bleeding, she said. Not that I've seen, Dante replied. The woman held out her hand. Bianca Conti. I fix the people around here and occasionally their manners. I shook it because refusing seemed childish. Sienna. She knows. Nino handed Bianca my purse and made the sign of the cross over his own chest. The boss collected another problem. Bianca looked unimpressed. The day you become a solution, I'll alert the Vatican. A laugh escaped me before I could help it. Dante's gaze shifted toward me. Not sharp. Something else. Something almost startled and immediately hidden. Bianca noticed everything. I could tell by how she didn't let it show. She took my chin lightly, checking my pupils, then my wrists. Shock. Mild. Pride. Severe. She released me. Tea, dry clothes, 1 call to your mother, then bed. I blinked. Bed. I glinked bed. Try not to make me sedate anyone tonight. Dante took my phone from an inside pocket I hadn't even seen him lift it from. Call from the study, he said. You went through my bag? I had it checked. For what? For whatever someone might have put in it. Nino raised 1 finger. To be fair, people almost never thank us for not letting them die cleverly. I stared at Dante. Do you control every room you walk into? He answered without any visible irritation. Yes. That should have been enough warning for a lifetime. Instead, I followed Bianca down a corridor, while marble clicked softly under our shoes, and somewhere in the house men spoke in Italian until a door opened and all of them stopped at once. At the study, Dante handed me my phone. "One call," he said. "Speaker." I glared at him. He waited. It was the first real confrontation between us, and it didn't look like one. No shouting, no slammed hands, just his stillness against my anger, and somehow his quiet made me feel louder than yelling would have. I called my mother. She answered sleepy and worried, and I lied with a steadiness that frightened me. Late problem at the hotel. Staying with Bianca. Home tomorrow. She believed exactly enough to let me go, which hurt in its own direction. When the call ended, I set the phone down harder than necessary. "You can't keep me here," I said. Dante stood on the far side of the desk, one palm resting beside a silver letter opener. "Tonight, I can." "That is not comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you." The honesty of it chilled and steadied me at the same time. He slid a keycard across the desk. "East Wing, 2 guards outside the hall. If you need anything, ask Bianca. If you try to leave through a garden door, Marco will stop you before the handle turns." I frowned. "Marco? My head of security. Does everyone in your life come with instructions?" A pause. Then, "Most things worth keeping do." The line hit somewhere it should not have. He looked away first, toward the rain-dark window. Toward anything but me. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow we find out who burned you in public." He said it like promise, not sympathy. And because he did, I believed him. I woke before sunrise in a room bigger than my apartment. For a few stunned seconds I didn't remember where I was. Then the ceiling medallion, the heavy drapes, the particular silence of guarded houses all returned at once. Not empty silence. Managed silence. The kind produced by walls thick enough to hold secrets and men disciplined enough not to let them leak. My dress from last night hung steamed and pressed near the wardrobe. Someone had placed slippers at the bedside. I sat up too fast and found a tray on the small table by the window. Coffee. Toast. A folded note and slanted handwriting. Eat. Pride metabolizes badly. Bianca, I stared at it and laughed under my breath, which turned into something else almost immediately. If I cried in a stranger's silk guest robe at 7 in the morning, I was never getting my dignity back. So I drank the coffee instead and stood at the window until my breathing evened out. The grounds below were all gravel paths, clipped hedges, and one glass-roofed structure attached to the east side of the house. A kitchen conservatory, I realized a second later. That detail changed something in me before I could stop it. By 9, Bianca had found me in the hall and taken me downstairs with the brisk kindness of a woman who trusted people only after checking their pulse first. "Before you ask," she said. "Yes, your mother's phone will be monitored today. No, you do not get to know how. And yes, you're allowed coffee twice before Dante starts calling it a medical issue." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "He says your name like you're the only person here who gets to ignore him." "That's because I am." She opened the conservatory door. Warmth hit my face first, then citrus, then sugar. The room was part greenhouse, part working pastry kitchen. Lemon trees and terracotta pots lined one wall. Copper pans hung above a marble island. Beyond to the glass ceiling, rain traced down in silver lines thin enough to soften the morning. Dante stood at the far counter speaking to a broad-shouldered man with a scar through one eyebrow. Security, obviously. The scarred man looked like he distrusted chairs. Dante turned when I came in. Not quickly. Nothing about him was quick, unless it needed to hurt someone. "This is Marco DeSantis," he said. "He dislikes variables." Marco nodded once. "You're one." I gathered. His gaze lingered on me a second too long to feel friendly. "Don't wander." Bianca set a hand briefly at my back, a small acceptance disguised as movement. "That's Marco being charming." "I'm never charming," Marco said. "Correct." Dante pulled out a chair at the work table. Sit. There were folders laid out beside a tray holding ingredient lists from the hotel gala. Also my recipe notebook. I stopped short. Why do you have that? We collected your locker before the hotel could erase anything else, Marco said. I crossed to the table and picked up the notebook, relief and violation arriving together. My mother had given me that leather-bound book when I started culinary school. Half the pages held recipes. The other half held experiments, ratios, and sketches of plated desserts I made when I couldn't sleep. Dante watched my thumb rest on the cover. Can you identify what was on the plate? He asked. From anyone else, the question might have sounded doubtful. From him, it sounded like a challenge issued only because he already thought I could answer. I looked through the hotel printouts first. Standard cocoa percentages, citrus oils, sugar weights. Then I found a tiny notation beside the garnish prep column. SA silver almond, not an ingredient, a supplier code. My head lifted. This wasn't kitchen stock. Marco leaned forward. Meaning? Silver almond is not almond. It's the trade name for a finishing sugar a few boutique suppliers use when they want an artificial shimmer. It smells faintly nutty because of benzaldehyde. If someone mixed that with enough extract, it would cover bitter almond for anyone who wasn't paying attention. You were paying attention, Dante said. I did not look at him. It was my plate. The words came out sharper than I meant. Bianca glanced at me, then tactfully busied herself at the espresso machine. Marco took the sheet. Who orders this supplier? Not us. I tapped the code. Luxury event houses, private villas, anyone who wants desserts to sparkle more than taste. Dante's mouth almost changed at that, a useful philosophy. I opened the notebook to a blank page and started listing likely distributors from memory. My hand steadied once I had something exact to do. Measurements had always been kinder than feelings. Sugar either reached thread stage or it didn't. Butter either split or held. People were the ingredient that refused consistency. Halfway through the list, Dante set a plate in front of me. On it sat a single unfinished dessert from my notebook. Burnt orange sponge. Dark chocolate mousse. Thin caramel shell cracked deliberately down one side. I stared. Who made this? I had your kitchen notes copied, Bianca said from behind me. The staff wanted to test one. Nino appeared in the doorway carrying 3 protein bars and the expression of a man betrayed by breakfast. It's excellent, he announced, which is upsetting, because joy has calories. I looked up despite myself. You tried it? I try everything tragic. He pointed at the caramel shell. This one feels personal. It did, because the shell had to be poured hard and thin so it looked stronger than it was. One wrong touch and it shattered under the softness beneath. Dante cut a piece with the side of his fork and ate it without looking away from me. I became absurdly aware of his hands, of the low sound the fork made against porcelain, of the fact that I was trying very hard not to notice any of this, which only made it worse. It's bitter first, he said. It's supposed to be. And then orange? Yes, and underneath that something softer. Nino sighed theatrically. If the boss starts describing dessert like forbidden poetry, I'm leaving. Bianca didn't look up from her cup. No, you're not. Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it and went still. We traced silver almond. Everyone looked at him. Paid through Castiello events, special handling order, last-minute add-on to the gala. I frowned. Castiello? Dante answered. Leonardo Castiello owns the event house attached to 3 of my hotels. The way he said owns told me the rest was complicated. Marco added, and he had full access to the ballroom. There it was, the first edge of the threat drawing itself. Outside, rain drummed softly over glass. Inside, Dante set down his fork and looked at the dessert again, then at me, like the shell and what sat beneath it, had told him something he would not say aloud. Dante, she, built sweetness, the way other people built defenses, layer by layer, precise enough to survive heat. When she stopped the busboy from confessing, she had not looked brave. She had looked resigned to pain and unwilling to spread it downward. Katerina used to do that. Step between. Keep the smaller things safe. Smile later, alone, if there was anything left to smile about. Dante had followed Sienna outside because the plate had been wrong. He kept her because her silence had not been. By the fourth day, I knew the sound of his house. Not every sound, just the ones that mattered. Marco's walk, heavy, economical, always half a beat ahead of anyone he escorted. Bianca's, quick, unafraid, usually carrying glass or bad news. Nino's, fast until birds appeared, then deeply suspicious of air itself. And Dante's quiet enough that I felt him more often than I heard him. The temperature changed. Conversations shortened. Rooms chose a shape around him. He had not let me leave. He had also not made me feel caged in the ways I expected. That was worse in some respects. Hard bars are easier to hate than careful ones. That afternoon, Bianca smuggled me onto the rooftop greenhouse attached to the west wing under the excuse that I needed sunlight, and she needed basil. The roof smelled like wet stone and rosemary, and the city spread gray and glittering beyond the parapet. Nino was already there with a basket of produce and a face full of grievance. "Do you know," he said to no one in particular, "how much protein a woman like Bianca expects a man to consume? I am one egg away from joining a monastery." Bianca clipped basil without sympathy. "You ate panna cotta in the wine cellar at midnight." That was emotional medicine. He reached for a tomato. A pigeon landed on the railing behind him. Nino froze. I watched his shoulders lock. "Are you all right?" He turned slowly, saw the pigeon, and took 3 dignified steps backward into a lemon tree. "No." Bianca did not even look up. "It's smaller than your shoe. It has motives." I laughed before I could stop myself, and the sound bounced oddly bright under the glass canopy. That was when Dante walked in. He had come through the far door so quietly I hadn't noticed until Nino straightened, and all the space in the greenhouse seemed to rearrange itself around one man in a charcoal suit with rain on the shoulders. His gaze found me first, then the basil, then Nino, who was still maintaining a strategic distance from the pigeon. "Explain," Dante said. Nino lifted one hand. "Hostile wildlife. It's eating lavender," Bianca said. "It's surveilling." I bit the inside of my cheek to stop another laugh. It failed. Dante looked at me while I was laughing, and for a second I forgot the bird, the roof, the city, all of it. His expression did not soften exactly. It opened by a fraction, enough to make me feel the danger of being seen by him in a less defended moment. He turned to Bianca. "We traced the silver almond payment. Castiello's accountant is dead." Marco came through behind him at once, wet-haired and grim. "Staged overdose. Too neat." The air changed. I set down the clipping basket. So it wasn't just the gala. "No," Marco said. "And someone inside the hotel scrubbed footage of your station 5 minutes before service." I crossed my arms because suddenly the roof felt too exposed. "You think Leonardo Castiello framed me?" "I think," Dante said, "Leonardo used the room he already had and the chef he assumed no one important would follow outside." That line caught in me. Bianca handed me a paring knife to trim basil stems. The small steel weight steadied my hand. "Why would he want to poison you in public?" I asked. Dante's eyes stayed on the skyline. Public collapse invites speculation. Speculation moves markets. Markets move loyalty. Marco translated it more humanly. If Dante looked weak at that gala, 3 men in Brooklyn and 2 in Jersey would start imagining future careers. I let that settle. The pigeon flew off. Nino exhaled like a condemned man spared at dawn. Bianca said, "Try not to faint. It ruins your coloring." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Your tenderness is why I persist." We went quiet after that. Rain tapped the greenhouse glass. Someone below wheeled metal across tile. The city kept moving, shamelessly ordinary beneath the edge of things. I was trimming basil when the knife slipped, not badly. Just enough to nick my thumb. I hissed. Dante was beside me before the blood fully surfaced. The speed of it startled me more than the cut. He took my hand without asking, one broad palm under mine. the other closing around my wrist. Warm, firm, entirely too steady. "It's nothing," I said. He looked at the bead of blood gathering at my thumb. "It's bleeding. That is how cuts usually work." Something almost happened to his mouth. He lifted my hand closer to the light. I became stupidly aware of everything at once. The cool air on my damp skin, the heat of his fingers, the fact that Marco and Bianca had both tactfully turned away, the fact that Nino had not and was failing to pretend otherwise. Dante reached into his inside pocket, took out a folded handkerchief, and wrapped my thumb in it with the concentration of a man disarming something delicate. A smear of sugar from the basil table brushed my upper lip as I breezed out. His eyes flicked to it. His thumb came up, one light drag across my mouth. Gone. The whole greenhouse vanished around the contact. I stopped breathing. He did too. This was one of the almosts. One of the moments that became larger because it did not become what it could have. His hand stayed near my face a heartbeat too long. My body knew that before my mind did. If he had leaned in even an inch, I don't know what I would have done. Maybe stepped back. Maybe not. The rooftop door banged open. Marco's phone was already in his hand. Problem. Dante stepped away first. Of course he did. "What kind?" he asked. "Fast kind. Chef Rulli is gone. Apartment stripped. And Paolo Rizzi just missed his pickup outside daycare because 2 men asked his sister what route she walks home." The blood left my face. Dante's head turned toward me. The violence in his stillness was worse than shouting could have been. "Inside," he said. No one argued. Not even me. As he took the basil knife from my hand and set it down, the rain struck harder over the glass, and I understood 2 things at once. The mystery of the gala had closed, and something much worse had opened. Paolo and his sister were moved before sunset. I knew because I heard Marco arguing over routes in the hall outside the study, and because Bianca came to the kitchen with too much coffee and the face she wore when someone had nearly become a body. "He made it," she said before I asked. "The girl, too." I closed my eyes. The relief hurt. The kitchen conservatory had become my place in the house by then, if not my room. Sugar obeyed me even when the rest of my life no longer did. That morning I had started pot sucré with hands that wanted something exact, and by afternoon the counters were lined with tart shells and bowls of blood orange curd cooling over ice. Bianca leaned against the refrigerator and watched me work. "You cook when you're frightened," she said. "I bake." Even more revealing. I smiled despite myself and kept whisking. The front door sounded an hour later. Men's voices, wet shoes on stone. Then Marco arrived with a cardboard archive box set under one arm. "This was in your apartment building's basement storage," he said. My hand stopped. The box was flour-stained, old, sealed with blue packing tape I recognized immediately. My father's handwriting ran across the lid in slanted block letters. "Bellini soup pli. Winter." I stared at it too long. My father had supplied pastry ingredients to hotels before his back gave out and the debt swallowed the business. After that, the box records went into storage because looking at them made him quiet in a way I hated. Marco set the box on the work table. We found 2 men already inside the basement when my team got there. Were they alive? Yes. Regrettably for them. He said it flatly, which told me enough. I sliced the tape. Inside were invoices, recipe folders, old sugar molds wrapped in newspaper, and my father's black ledger notebook. The real one. Leather cracked at the spine. Elastic band worn thin. My throat tightened. Why would anyone want this? Marco's eyes moved to the notebook. "Open it." I did. At first, it looked like flour orders and butter costs. Then I saw the pattern in the margins. My father used frosting ratios the way some people used shorthand. 1/ for cream, 2 for sugar, 3 for emergency. This ledger had 3s on every 4th page. I sat down hard on the stool. "What is it?" Bianca asked. My father used recipe ratios to hide numbers when suppliers were cheating him. I turned 3 pages at once and felt the old logic slide back under my skin. This isn't pastry inventory, it's transfer accounting. Marco stepped closer. For who? I looked up. The name on the coded entries was not Dante's. It was Castiello Hospitality. My father had not just supplied flour. He had tracked irregular shipments for Leonardo's hotel division years before I ever worked in one. Sugar orders that didn't match kitchen volume. Vanilla routed through shell vendors. Refrigerated deliveries large enough to hide anything from cash to contraband. The room went colder. Dante came in while I was still turning pages. Not hurried. Somehow, that made him look more dangerous. He took in the ledger, Marco's face, my expression, and knew immediately the shape of the problem had changed. What did you find? I wet my lips. My father was keeping side records on Castiello deliveries, hidden in pastry ratios, Bianca muttered. Of course he was. I pushed the notebook toward Dante and pointed at a column of coded weights. This line should be chocolate imported from Modissa. The volume is wrong, tripled. Same with saffron, same with almond paste. They're using luxury ingredient invoices to bury something else in the books. He didn't touch the page at first. He looked at my fingers on it. Did you know your father kept this? He asked. No. That much was true enough to sting. He opened to the back. A loose photograph fell out. It was me at 16 in my father's old bakery apron, dusted in flour to the elbows and laughing at something off camera. On the back, in my father's hand, were 4 words. She knows what breaks. I read them and had to look away. Dante picked up the photo. Something moved behind his eyes, then sealed itself. My voice came unsteady. He taught me sugar first because it punishes panic. If your hands shake, it tells the truth. No one in the room answered. Marco took the ledger to the window and started photographing pages. I should have left it there, should have let the men with guns and suits turn my father's secret into their own machinery. Instead, I made the mistake that cost us. I reached for my phone. Dante's attention shifted immediately. No. My mother deserves to know men were in the basement. She deserves safety more. That isn't the same thing. It is tonight. His calm made me angrier than shouting would have. You don't understand what it's like to have your family blindsided by things they never agreed to carry. The moment I said it, I knew I had stepped wrong. Not because he flinched. Dante did not flinch. But Marco went still. Bianca looked down at the tart shells instead of at either of us. A silence heavier than the room settled. When Dante spoke, his voice had gone very flat. You think I don't understand that? I should have apologized then. I didn't. Pride is the stupidest ingredient. It curdles everything. I think, I said, you're used to choosing for other people. He held my gaze a moment longer. Then he reached out, took the ledger from my hands, and closed it. Tonight, he said quietly, that is exactly what keeps them alive. He turned to Marco. Move Mrs. Bellini before dark. Secondary property. Bianca, med list, and nurse. Then, he left the kitchen with my father's notebook under his arm and my anger still sparking uselessly between my ribs. Bianca came beside me after the door shut. You were wrong, she said. I laughed once, shaky. I know. And still not entirely. I looked at her. She folded the blood orange curd into the tart shells with a spoon neat enough to count as mercy. That's the trouble with men like him. They make coercion and protection wear the same coat. When I tasted the filling later, it came bitter first. The attack came with room service. By then I knew enough about Dante's world to understand that danger rarely arrived with its own music. It came under silver domes, inside legal envelopes, behind familiar faces. Bianca and I were in the downstairs pantry after midnight because I couldn't sleep, and she believed insomnia should at least produce decent cannoli. We stood shoulder to shoulder piping ricotta into shells while the house settled around us. Soft footsteps overhead. A distant door latch. The low hum of refrigeration and the sweeter smell of orange zest under all that cold stainless steel. Your fill is too neat, Bianca said. It's pastry, not triage. Tierage leaves more room for surprise. She was scraping pistachios when the service bell rang. Not from the kitchen panel. From the east corridor. Bianca's head came up. Mine did too. No one uses that bell after 10, she said. The second ring came faster, impatient. Then Marco's voice cut through the hall, sharp enough to strip paint. Down. Bianca shoved me behind the prep table so hard my hip hit the tile. The first shot broke the glass on the dry goods cabinet. Sugar rained white across the floor. The next 30 seconds never arranged themselves properly in memory. Noise. Splintering wood. Men shouting in Italian. Bianca dragging a pistol from the medical kit under the sink with a curse so elegant I almost admired it. The service door banging inward. A masked man came through with a silenced gun and kitchen whites over body armor. Another behind him. I grabbed the nearest thing, my blowtorch, and clicked the flame alive. Because panic needed a shape. The first attacker saw Bianca, not me. That saved her. I hit his forearm with the torch flame as he raised the gun. He yelled, jerked back, and Bianca shot him center mass before the sound finished leaving his throat. The second man pivoted toward me. Then Dante hit him from the side. Not like in films. Not smooth. Brutal. Efficient. He drove the man into the stainless shelf hard enough to spill copper molds in a shrieking avalanche. The gun skidded under the freezer. Dante never reached for it. He broke the attacker's wrist, took the knife from the man's own boot, and ended it before the body fully understood had already lost. Silence hit the pantry like another impact. My torch sputtered out in my hand. Dante turned to me. There was blood on his collar and flour dust on one shoulder. His face had gone so still it terrified me more than the killing had. All that violence, and not a trace of chaos in him afterward. Like this was the truest language he spoke. "Are you hit?" I shook my head. He crossed the room in 2 strides and caught my face between both hands as if confirming bone by bone that I was still whole. I stopped breathing. His thumbs dragged once under my jaw. Not gentle. Careful. There is a difference. Or there was, with him. Behind us, Margot and 2 men cleared the corridor. Nino arrived late with a shotgun, one shoe unlaced, and what sounded very much like outrage. "I was asleep," he informed the dead man on the floor. "There are boundaries." Bianca, already checking the body, said, "You screamed when the first shot fired." I made a tactical noise. Marco appeared in the doorway. East corridor breached through service staff entrance. 1 guard down, not dead. Kitchen runner was a plant. And we found this. He held up a folded parking voucher from the hotel garage. Castiello's private stamp. Dante's hand stayed on my face a second too long. His eyes never left mine. "Look at me." I did. And saw it then, maybe for the first time fully. Not just danger. Fear, not for himself. For me. Hidden so deep another woman might have missed it. That frightened me in a completely different direction. He stepped back first. Of course he did. Marco started issuing containment orders. Bianca hauled Nino by the sleeve to help with the wounded guard. The pantry emptied by degrees until it was only Dante, me, and Sugar under our shoes. I set the dead torch down very carefully. "My hands are shaking," I said, because saying something true felt easier than saying the thing pressing against my ribs. He looked at them. Then at me. "You burned him." "I know. You saved Bianca." I swallowed. I didn't think. You acted. The word landed warm. Outside the pantry, a stretcher wheel squeaked over marble and then faded. The house had returned to its habits already. Clean the blood. Secure the door. Continue. I hated that. I understood it too quickly. Dante reached toward the counter and picked up one of the cannoli shells that had survived the chaos. Broken at one end. Filling perfect. He held it out. I blinked. Now? Yes. That seems unwell. So does staring at your own hands like they belong to someone else. I took the cannolo. The shell cracked under my teeth. Sweet. Orange. Ricotta cold enough to bring me back into my body. He watched me eat it. Slowly, because apparently tonight wanted to kill me in every available way. "I know why I followed you outside," he said. My pulse stumbled. He looked down at the sugar scattered over black tile. Most people in my world, when they are cornered in public, they claw for the nearest ladder. They name names, sell smaller people, beg loudly. His jaw tightened once. You took the blame, protected the boy, and walked into the rain without asking anyone to save you. I couldn't answer, because the look in his eyes made the room feel smaller, and because something in me had already moved too far toward him to be called safe. Little Fire, he said, and the name was different now, lower, rougher. Rauffer, that was the moment. He stepped closer, not touching. Close enough that the cold orange on my tongue and the heat of him in front of me became one impossible thing. I should have moved back. I didn't. I don't know what I'm doing, I whispered. The truth cost enough that my face burned after I said it. His hand came up, stopped an inch from my mouth, another almost, sharper than all the others put together. You don't have to know, he said. Then he lowered his hand. He could have kissed me. He didn't, because outside that pantry men were already turning keycards and kept one hand near the small of my back and the other near his jacket as we crossed the service hall. The pastry floor had always been my favorite part of the hotel because it lived below performance. No chandeliers, no donors, just stainless steel, proofing cabinets, the low mechanical hum of refrigeration, and the clean tyranny of timing. Tonight, it felt wrong. Too empty. The kind of empty arranged by money. We reached the archive freezer doors at the end of the corridor. Matteo was already there. He stood with a tablet under one arm and a key card between two fingers. Lawyer perfect and a navy coat that cost more than my monthly rent. When he saw me, his expression shaped itself into concern so smoothly I nearly believed it for one terrible second. Miss Bellini, he said, I told Dante this was unnecessary. Marco didn't lower his guard. Then you can tell him again later. Matteo smiled. Of course, he swiped the key card. The lock beeped green. That was the moment. Not the card itself. Matteo had access to everything. But the smell that came off his cuff when he stepped aside bitter almond under expensive soap. My heart kicked hard. He had been near the plate. He had handled the garnish himself, or the supplier sample, or the prep bag. Something close enough for the scent to cling where ordinary men would never notice it. I turned toward Marco. Don't. The first shot hit the steel door beside his head. Marco shoved me sideways as the second shot tore through his shoulder. I slammed into a rolling rack of sheet pans, metal screaming against tile. Two men came out of the laundry corridor with guns already raised. Not hotel staff. Clean shoes. Dead eyes. Matteo did not flinch. That was the ugliest part. Not the betrayal. The ease. Marco fired once, caught one attacker in the thigh. Then took a boot to the ribs before he could reset his stance. I grabbed the nearest tray and threw it. Stainless steel clipped a man's wrist, enough to spoil his aim, enough to buy exactly one useless second. Matteo's gaze found mine. I would stop doing brave things if I were you, he said. Too late, I snapped, breathless and furious. He crossed the space between us with irritating calm, caught my wrist, and twisted the tray free before I could swing again. Not rough. Controlled. Like he was handling paperwork. Leonardo was right, he murmured. You are the sort of complication Dante mistakes for virtue. The line hit cold. One of the gunmen slammed Marco to his knees. Blood darkened the front of his shirt. His face had gone pale with the effort of staying upright. Run, he barked at me. Matteo smiled at that. Actually smiled. Then he opened the old sugar storage room and shoved me inside. I stumbled against a prep sink. Cold air wrapped around my bare arms. The room had been converted for event showpieces, glass shelves, sugar sculptures under plastic domes, racks of spun decorations waiting for some wedding or a diplomatic luncheon that now felt absurdly far from real life. Matteo stepped in after me, took my phone from my coat pocket, and set it on the counter behind him. You don't need to understand everything, he said. Only this. Dante has always believed he could build something clean on top of rot. Leonardo is correcting the architecture. By poisoning people, by removing sentiment from business. He sounded almost bored. I looked past him through the glass panel in the door. Marco tried to rise. One attacker hit him down again. You picked the wrong side, I said. Matteo's expression changed. Not anger, wariness. No, Miss Bellini. I picked the winning one. Then he backed out and sealed the door. The lock clicked. The room went very still. I stood there for one breath, 2, 3, then I moved. Panic is useless in pastry. Sugar punishes trembling. Timing punishes grief. I had learned that young enough for it to feel like religion. So I looked instead. Room layout. 1 prep sink. 1 drain. 1 wall alarm behind a plexiglass cover. Emergency hammer missing. Of course it was. Shelves of sugar swans, spun cages, blown isomalt ribbons, all brittle enough to look delicate and sharp enough to cut if hit right. Outside the glass, Matteo bent to say something to Marco I couldn't hear. I grabbed the nearest showpiece, a sugar lily the color of champagne, and smashed its stem against the counter edge. It shattered beautifully. I took the longest shard and drove it under the corner of the alarm cover. My hand slipped once. Blood welled along my knuckle where the sugar bit back. I kept prying. Outside, Matteo's head turned slightly, like he'd heard the scrape. The plexiglass cracked. Not enough. I jammed the shard again, harder. This time the cover snapped loose and clattered to the floor. My fingers closed over the red alarm lever. The door handle moved. Too late. I pulled the alarm before the handle finished turning. The shriek tore through the pastry floor like metal being born wrong. Lights strobed. Somewhere farther down the service hall, a fire door slammed and men started shouting over one another. Matteo swore for the first time since I had known him. I yanked a second sugar shard from the broken lily and backed toward the far shelving unit just as the door burst inward. Not Dante. Leonardo Castiello. I knew him at once, even though I had only seen him in photographs clipped to trade magazines and hotel press releases. He was older than Dante by a few years, silver at the temples, beautiful in the polished, ruinous way rich men became when no one had denied them often enough. His suit fit like diplomacy. His eyes did not. He took in the broken alarm, the shard in my hand, and smiled with something almost like approval. So this is the pastry chef. My throat tightened. You framed me. I used you, he corrected. Framing suggests permanence. Outside, the alarm still screamed. Matteo stepped in behind him, irritation finally cracking his smoothness. She triggered the floor. Leonardo's gaze stayed on me. Dante does have a type. I didn't answer. That seemed to please him. He was softer once, Leonardo said, almost conversational. People forget that. They see the finished blade and think he came sharpened. He didn't. He learned. From you? A flicker then. There and gone. Among others, there was history between them. Not business only. I felt that immediately. Something older, more expensive. Matteo reached for me. I slashed the sugar shard across the back of his hand. He hissed and recoiled, blood bright against his cuff. The move bought me room and nothing else, but right then, room was enough to count as survival. Leonardo actually laughed. I can see why he followed you outside. Shots cracked in the corridor. Marco's voice roared something I couldn't make out under the alarm, but I knew the sound of him hitting a problem full force. Another shot. Then another, closer. Matteo drew his gun. Leonardo didn't. He only stepped back, calm as winter. Leave her alive, he said. If he gets here in time, I want him to understand the margin. Matteo lifted the gun. The storage room door frame exploded inward under a shoulder, and Dante came through it like violence given legal standing. He hit Matteo first. No hesitation. No warning. Just impact. Matteo fired wide as Dante drove him into the prep sink hard enough to crack porcelain. The gun skidded under the shelving. Leonardo moved for the side exit. Marco appearing there at the same instant with blood down one sleeve and murder in his eyes. For one suspended second, everyone in the room chose. Leonardo chose escape. Marco chose pursuit. Matteo chose the knife taped inside his wrist. I saw the blade flash before Dante did. Left, I shouted. He pivoted. The knife took his side instead of his ribs, a bad line instead of a mortal one. My stomach dropped anyway. Dante's expression did not change. He broke Matteo's wrist with one compact movement, took the knife away, and put him on the floor where polished language could not help him. Then he turned to me. Everything else dropped out of the room. The alarm, the lights, the blood, all of it. He crossed the space between us and caught the back of my neck in one hand, my jaw in the other, like he needed proof from bone and heat that I was still there. I could feel the blood soaking through his shirt. I could smell cold air and burnt wiring and the faint bitter almond that had started all of this. "You pulled the alarm," he said. "Yes." His forehead came down to mine. Not by accident. Not quite a kiss either. Worse, because it carried almost we had left unfinished. "I heard it 3 floors up," he said, and his voice was rough now, the restraint in it finally showing its cost. "Little fire. Something in me gave." "I didn't know if you'd get here," I whispered. "I know." It cost everything to say the next part. "I didn't know how to leave you." His eyes closed for one brief breaking second. Then he kissed me. No rush. No conquest. The opposite of taking. It felt like the truth of all his stopping had finally been allowed somewhere to land. Warm and shaking at the edges and devastating because he was still holding himself back inside it, even now, even bleeding, even after nearly losing me. When he lifted his head, I was the one trembling. Behind us, Matteo made a wet sound on the floor. Dante didn't look at him. Leonardo's voice came from the corridor mouth. Calm. Distant already. "You always were predictable where women are concerned." Dante turned then, all warmth gone in an instant. Leonardo stood beyond Marco's reach, one hand on the service release bar leading to the underground garage. Rain-wet air moved in behind him. "Tonight at the Aurelio," he said. "Ballroom level. Come alone if you want the rest of your city to keep eating without fear." Then he was gone. Marco swore and took off after him with 2 men. The room settled into aftermath by degrees. Matteo bled and stared at the ceiling as if eloquence might still save him. It wouldn't. I knew that from Dante's face without needing anyone to explain it. Bianca rushed in with Nino behind her carrying a trauma kit and, absurdly, 2-way Claire's and a napkin. "I was interrupted mid-survival snack," he announced, then saw Dante's side. "Madonna." Bianca shoved him toward me. "Hold pressure there, not her, him." I took the compress anyway. My hands pressed against Dante's wound. His covered mine for a second, steadying the pressure, and the look that passed between us then had no room left for almost. Only consequence. Tonight at the Aurelio. One of us might not survive it. By the time night fell, the Grand Aurelio glittered again. That was Leonardo's style. Never waste a stage. The ballroom had been reset for a private investment supper announced that afternoon under a charitable pretext. No press. No public list. Just the exact cluster of donors, officials, and hospitality board members whose deaths or illness would fracture half the city's alliances if poison touched the wrong glasses. Dante should have gone alone the way Leonardo demanded. Instead, we prepared like truth had teeth. Bianca stitched Dante's side in a hotel office that still smelled faintly of printer toner and old lilies. Marco mapped service routes on the wall. Nino hid 2 pistols in an insulated dessert carrier and spent the entire time complaining that tactical wear flattened his best features. "I look municipal," he said. "You look alive," Bianca replied. "The distinction matters." My part arrived because it had to. Leonardo had used desserts twice already. Garnish, scent, supply chain. If he planned to poison the room tonight, he would hide it where luxury disguised excess. I knew pastry better than any of Dante's men knew guns. That didn't make me brave. It made me necessary. So I went back into the ballroom kitchen wearing chef whites and a cap pulled low, flanked by Marco's people pretending to be banquet staff. The pastry line was too perfect. Every tray accounted for, every glaze mirror smooth, every garnish identical. That alone told me something was wrong. Real kitchens never looked this clean half an hour before service unless fear had already done part of the work. I moved down the line, tasting with the tip of a spoon. Lemon cream, safe. Chocolate mousse, safe. Poached pear syrup. Safe. Then I reached the champagne sabayon set for the head table. It smelled of vanilla first, then clove, then the wrong kind of sweetness underneath. Floral, medicinal, almost impossible to catch unless you spent your life training your mouth against lies. Oleander extract cut thin enough to wait 10 minutes before closing throats. I set down the spoon. Marco appeared at my shoulder as if pulled by the change in my breathing. What? Not the desserts. I kept my voice low. The sauce on table service only. Head table. They want it to look targeted and ceremonial. His eyes sharpened. Can you prove it? I dipped a silver tester into the sabayon and touched it to my tongue again, hating how sure I was. Yes, he murmured into his cuff. The room beyond the kitchen shifted immediately. Staff redirections, silent signals, men moving where chandeliers hid their discipline. I plated replacements myself with shaking hands that steadied as soon as the work began. Sugar, cream, heat, truth. One last time I brushed caramel shards across the tops, little amber slivers bright as warning. Then Leonardo stepped into the kitchen. No guards, no panic, just that same polished cruelty wearing evening clothes. He looked at the replacement tray in my hands and then at me. You really can taste betrayal, he said. I set the tray down carefully. You should know, you keep serving it. He smiled. Dante taught you to speak harder? No, I said. You did. That landed somewhere. Good. He came closer, slow enough to feel like control. Do you know what he was before all this discipline? Before the hotels and the tailored silence? His eyes moved over the kitchen as if it amused him. He was a boy with fists and a starving sister and no idea that love makes you negotiable. Katerina. There it was, the wound in full. He told you that? I asked. No, I was there. The back door swung open. Dante entered. For a second, no one spoke. The kitchen fans hummed. Steam rolled soft and ghostly above the bain marie. Men froze with knives and ladles half lowered because some kinds of power made ordinary motion disrespectful. Leonardo turned fully toward him. You brought her. I brought the one person in this building who can tell the difference between dessert and murder, Dante said. Leonardo laughed once, still choosing sentiment. Dante's voice stayed level. Still calling weakness what you envy. They faced each other across my work table, and I finally saw it clearly. Not just rivals, brothers by damage if not by blood. Leonardo was what Dante would have become if Katerina's death had cured him of caring instead of scarring him with it. The man on the other side of the same wound, Leonardo's smile thinned. She died because you hesitated. The room went silent enough to hear refrigeration click on in the next pantry. Dante did not move. No, she died because you handed our location to men who wanted leverage. A muscle worked in Leonardo's jaw. It bought us the docks, he said. It sold her. The words landed like a verdict. Leonardo drew first. He had a slim pistol hidden along his spine, fast enough that another man might have won on speed alone. Dante was already moving. Marco's team hit the lights. The kitchen dropped into emergency gold and shadows. I ducked, grabbed the hot copper saucepan nearest my hand and threw it at Leonardo's shooter coming through the side door. Boiling sabayon hit his wrist. He screamed, weapon jerking wide. Nino, from somewhere behind the pastry fridge, shouted, "For once my snack curse has tactical value," and fired. The fight turned ugly and close. Stainless steel rang. A rack tipped. Plates shattered under expensive shoes. Bianca dragged a wounded server behind the low freezer line while Marco drove through the side entrance like a battering ram with a pulse. Dante and Leonardo vanished through the kitchen's terrace doors into rain. I followed before anyone could stop me. The rooftop greenhouse above the ballroom glowed dim under emergency lighting. Wet glass. Basil scent. City black around the edges. Dante and Leonardo crashed through the herb tables like two versions of one decision trying to kill the other. Leonardo got the upper hand once, twice. They knew each other too well. Old habits turned lethal. He drove Dante back against the central support and hissed something I couldn't hear. Then I saw it. The irrigation valve line beside Leonardo's foot. One sharp tug and the pressure hose would whip across slick tile exactly where he was braced. I yanked it. Water blasted sideways. Leonardo's footing went out. Dante took the opening. He disarmed him with one brutal twist and drove the broken valve spike under his ribs. For a moment, Leonardo just stared at him. Rain hammered the glass overhead. "You always choose the girl," he said. Dante's face gave nothing back. "No, I choose not to become you." When Leonardo fell, something in Dante went with him. Not relief, not joy. Something older, the last piece of a boyhood built beside the wrong man. Marco burst onto the roof with 2 guards. Bianca right behind. Nino skidded in last, soaked and indignant. "Is everyone dead?" he demanded. Then, seeing Leonardo, "Never mind. Mixed review." I crossed to Dante. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from after. I took them anyway. Below us, the ballroom alarms cut out one by one. The poison sauce had been removed. Guests were being escorted out under a fabricated gas leak and a great deal of very expensive confusion. The city would survive dinner. Dante looked at Leonardo's body once, then at me. It was over. War did not end cleanly. It ended in statements drafted by lawyers, in markets stabilizing because no one publicly choked at the Aurelio, in quiet funerals for the men who had not made it through corridors and roofs and other people's ambition. Carlo died 2 days later, with Bianca holding one hand and Marco standing in the hall refusing anyone entry. We all felt that loss differently. Mine came every time I crossed the East Kitchen and remembered him carrying flour as if helping were a private habit. Matteo vanished from custody before he could testify and turned up 3 weeks later in the East River. No one asked Dante for confirmation. No one needed to. I went back to pastry in the strangest way possible, under guard in Dante's flagship hotel. With a contract so thorough it felt like armor and chains at once. The Aurelio reopened its private kitchen in late spring, and I took the position Leonardo had once promised me through Chef Rulli and then burned in public. This time I accepted it with the whole truth in view. I belonged to no one. I had chosen where I stood. The first week back, Paolo Rizzi brought me a coffee every afternoon exactly the way I liked it and never once apologized for the night I stopped him from confessing. That mattered more than apology would have. Survival sometimes looked like good espresso and not making the wound perform itself for others. Nino recovered from his shoulder injury by developing an even more operatic devotion to Bianca. He left her handwritten notes on medical supply invoices, counted almonds like they were rosary beads, and once told a room full of armed men that if she ever loved him back, he would renounce processed sugar out of respect. Bianca, while changing his dressing, said, "That is the least credible threat I have ever heard." By midsummer, even Marco's mouth had almost learned how to approve of me. Almost. He found me in the conservatory one evening, piping honey mousse into tiny tart shells shaped like rose petals. "Security walked the new loading route," he said. "Clear." "That's very romantic, Marco." He considered it. "I can make it less so. Please don't." He nodded toward the tray. "Those for tonight?" "Yes, for him." I looked up. His expression gave away nothing, but I knew by then that Marco asked direct questions only when he'd decided the answer mattered. "For the house?" I said. He made a non-committal sound that translated roughly to liar and left me alone with my tarts and my pulse. Dante arrived after dark. No entourage this time, just him. Rain on his coat shoulders, the familiar gravity of his silence entering before his voice did. He set his black umbrella by the door with that elegant snap softened by memory now. Not a shield over danger anymore. A sound my body recognized as his. I should not have loved that. I did. He took off his coat and watched me finish the last tart. "You changed the glaze. It was too sweet before." He came closer to the tray. "And now?" "Bitter honey underneath. Rose cream on top. Burnt sugar edge." His gaze moved from the pastry to me. "You've started making desserts that tell on you." He rose straight to my face. That is not a question, I said. No. He picked one up and bit into it. The caramel edge cracked. His eyes lifted as the flavor settled. Well, I asked, because apparently I had lost all instinct for self-preservation where this man was concerned. He set the tart down carefully. It tastes, he said, like someone who still expects sweetness to cost blood but makes it anyway. I looked away first, because if I didn't, I might say something too large and unfinished and human. Rain ticked softly over the glass roof. Lemon leaves shifted in the dark. The whole room smelled of sugar, basil, and the cedar-cold trace of him. He walked around the table and stopped close enough that my breath changed. This used to be where the almosts lived. Now it was where the earned things began. I've been waiting, he said. For what? For you to have a week that doesn't begin with fear? That hit me so hard I had to brace one hand on the marble. He drew a small box from his pocket and set it down beside the tray of tarts. No flourish, no kneeling, just weight and intention between us. I can offer protection, he said. A home you chose once already, a name if you want it, space if you don't. His eyes held mine. What I'm asking for is not gratitude and not rescue. I could hardly breathe. I'm asking, he said more quietly, for the life that starts after survival. The room went very still. I touched the box but didn't open it yet. My fingers shook. Dante, he waited. That was the thing with him. Even now, even here. He never reached into my answer before I gave it. I still get angry, I admitted. At your world. At what it asks of people, at myself for understanding it too well now. You should. I still don't know what parts of me belong here. His gaze dropped briefly to my flour-dusted hands, the honest ones. That was almost enough to make me cry. Instead I laughed, small and wrecked at the edges. You always say the shortest thing possible. It's usually the truest. I opened the box. The ring inside was not ornate, old-cut diamond, narrow gold band, stronger for what it refused to perform. I looked back up. If I say yes, it won't clean any of this. I know. It won't make me easier. His mouth changed by a fraction. I know that too, little fire. Warm now. Entirely warm. Something inside me settled with the sound of it. Yes, I said. He exhaled once. Almost invisible. Almost devastating. Then he slid the ring onto my finger with hands that had ended wars and still treated this like the more dangerous act. When he kissed me, it was rain and restraint and home learned the hard way. No rush. No need to prove anything. Just his mouth on mine and the quiet certainty of something chosen twice. From the hallway, Nino's voice floated in with terrible timing. I heard silence and assumed engagement or death. Bianca answered, dry as paper. If it were death, you'd still be eavesdropping. Correct. But respectfully. I laughed against Dante's mouth. He closed his eyes at the sound like a man taking a wound he would never defend against. That night, nothing burned. 10 months later, I was running late because one of my commas had dropped a spun sugar crown 5 minutes before a wedding tasting and then looked at me with the exact face of a person waiting to be humiliated. She was 19, hands still too fast when nervous, brilliant with patachoux, terrible with silence. It was my fault, she said before I could speak. I should have checked the humidity, chef. I know, I'm sorry. Her voice had already started shaking. Around us, the pastry kitchen of the Aurelio moved at pre-service speed, burners ticking, sheet pans ringing softly against marble, vanilla steeping somewhere in cream. Through the far doors came the faint murmur of money assembling itself into appetite upstairs. I looked at the broken sugar on the floor, then at her. Then at the banquet captain, waiting in the doorway with impatience already polished onto his face. It was mine, I said. The girl blinked. Chef, I approved the placement. I crouched, picked up a curved shard and handed it to her. Next time, Lower the pull by 3 degrees and let the cage rest before lifting. Sugar doesn't like being rushed when the air is wet. Her eyes filled anyway, not with shame. Relief, dangerous relief. The banquet captain started to protest. I cut him off with the calmest voice I owned. You'll have a replacement centerpiece in 11 minutes if you leave my floor and stop breathing panic into the room. He left. The girl stared at me. Why would you? Because being you is already expensive, I said. You don't need an audience added to the cost. I turned back to the marble and started again. Pulled sugar asks for the whole hand. Heat, angle, timing. Trust that what looks liquid can hold if treated properly. My fingers remembered before my nerves did. Gold ribbons stretched, curved, set. Another crown rose from ruin one strand at a time. I felt him before I saw him. The room did that still. Changed temperature, changed shape, changed the direction. Other people's attention leaned. Dante stood in the doorway in a dark coat, watching me work while the kitchen unconsciously quieted around him. No title announced him anymore. It didn't need to. Everyone in this building knew exactly who he was and why the city still preferred breathing around him. Our eyes met. And there it was. That pause. The same one from the ballroom. From Rain. From every moment since when he caught me doing the one thing he could never walk past, shielding the smaller person first and paying for it later. He came in only after the sugar set. You did it again, he said. I wiped my fingers on a towel. Dropped crowns are not capital offenses. That isn't what I meant. No, it wasn't. Behind him, Paulo, no longer a busboy, now floor supervisor with a tie he adjusted like it offended him, personally grinned at the young Camus and steered her gently back toward the cream station. Small survivals multiplying. I loved that more than I knew how to say. Dante came to the marble counter and looked at the finished crown. Better than the first. Failure is educational. So is mercy. The line landed low in me. I set down the sugar hook. You noticed. I always noticed. For 1 second, the whole kitchen fell away again and I was back under chandelier light, publicly ruined and too proud to beg while a busboy trembled beside me. Back in Rain with a stranger's umbrella opening over my head. Back at every threshold where this man had seen exactly what my silence cost and followed anyway. My voice came out quieter than I intended. It still matters to you. His eyes didn't leave mine. More. That was all. He never wasted words, and maybe that was why the ones he used had weight enough to bruise. Nino burst through the side door, carrying 2 garment bags and a pastry box. Good news. I survived tuxedo fittings. Bad news. Formal shoes remain fascist. Bianca followed him in wearing her own coat, and the engagement ring he had finally, unbelievably, put on her hand after 6 months of being bullied by fate and one near-fatal food poisoning scare that convinced them both life was too short for theatrical denial. You talk too much when happy, she informed him. I talk too much when conscious. He saw the sugar crown, whistled, and looked at me. Chef, if you ever leave the hotel, I'm throwing myself under a tasteful vehicle. You'd make it dramatic, I said. Obviously. Dante took my overnight bag from under the counter before I could reach for it. Another habit that should have annoyed me and mostly didn't anymore. Not because I'd grown smaller, because we had learned the difference between being handled and being accompanied. Service ended late. The wedding tasting loved the crown. The young Camus survived her mistake. Paolo sent up espresso with extra orange peel because he remembered. By the time we stepped out the side entrance, spring rain had started over Midtown fine, silver, almost warm. Dante opened his black umbrella with that same elegant snap. Chapter 1 had made that sound a warning. A border between me and a life already closing. Now it opened over both of us at once. Generous and familiar, the city blurring outside its shelter. I stepped under it without hesitation. He glanced down at my hand on his sleeve. The ring caught the streetlight. So did the old sugar burn scar near my knuckle from the night Matteo locked me in the cold room. We carried our histories openly now, not healed clean. Integrated. The car waited at the curb. We did not rush toward it. For a moment we just stood there listening to rain strike pavement and taxis hiss through puddles. The ordinary noise of a city that had nearly swallowed us whole and somehow ended up becoming ours anyway. "Little fire," he said. "Warm. Entirely earned." I looked up. "Yes?" His hand adjusted the umbrella angle, lowering it a fraction more over me than over himself. Same gesture, completely different weight. "When you stepped in front of that girl today," he said, "I remembered the ballroom, and I remembered what it cost me to watch you do it and know I was already gone." My heart stumbled once, hard. I didn't answer right away because some feelings still arrived too large for immediate language. Maybe that never changes. Maybe it shouldn't. So I leaned into his side instead, and he understood me in the silence. The unresolved part, I think, is this. Love does not refund what it costs. It does not return the safer life to the shelf untouched. Even now, in rain with his arm around me and laughter waiting back at the house and sugar drying under my nails, I sometimes think about the girl I was before the ballroom, and wonder whether she would forgive me for choosing this one. Would you have chosen Dante and let the safer life die for it? He tipped the umbrella lower, and I went home with him under the rain.